Nearly half the students doing that research at Harvard's School of Public Health are international students. And if Trump has his way, those students will be banned from the university. A federal judge already temporarily blocked that from happening. The next hearing is set for Thursday. Let's kick things off now with Chris Cillizza, journalist, political commentator, and NewsNation contributor. Chris, great to have you here. So this has devolved into quite a showdown between President Trump and Harvard, and neither side is backing down.
No, it's really interesting because I think you have to, I don't know, separate the politics from the policy, but at least talk about both of them. The politics of this, candidly, are probably pretty good for Donald Trump. I think a lot of people say elite institutions should not be getting federal money at all, no matter what it's for. This wokeism and the anti-Semitism on campus has to end, and Donald Trump is simply doing that. From a policy perspective, and you touched on this in your intro, Elizabeth, but I really do think it's important to underscore. A lot of what's going on here are government-funded research projects that only these big research institutions like Harvard and Princeton and Yale, Stanford can do. Right. I mean, you can't just, I'm all in favor of more money going to trade schools. I think we should have been doing that years ago. I think that's a great idea. I just don't think you can say, well, we'll just take all this money, we'll put it over here. What gets lost is there's no other institutions in this country able right now to do this work. I think even if you gave them the money to do this work, to build it and to set up the trials and all that stuff, would take years. Yeah. So I think you just have to acknowledge what's being lost if we do this.
All right. So, Chris, a lot of people look at that endowment of Harvard's, $53 billion, and they got the biggest endowment of any university in the world. And they say, why does Harvard need taxpayer dollars? You looked into it. It's a little complicated because most of that endowment consists of donations that are earmarked for specific things. Harvard can't use them.
That's exactly right. Look. Harvard has the biggest endowment of any university in the United States. I mean, I'm not trying to make excuses for Harvard. They have a $53 billion endowment. That's
massive.
But what I will say to your point is the vast majority of those gifts that go for that endowment are from individuals or foundations that are very specifically earmarked to be spent on specific things, whether it's the Kennedy School of Government or whatever, to be spent on very specific places. It's not just a general fund, right? I'm not necessarily saying, Elizabeth, that means that they should get $3 billion in federal money. I think that's a worthy debate to have. My only point is, I think rather than saying, why are we giving them this money? They're so woke and stuff. It's like, okay, I understand that. I understand most people probably didn't even know Harvard got any money from the federal government. At the same time, look at what that $3.2 billion is going toward. It is not going toward woke policies. It's going toward researching MS, finding a cure for cancer, building a hadron collider. Do you know what I mean? I'm pulling things out of thin air, but my point is it's going for research that is not partisan in any meaningful way. So fine if you want to end it, but understand you're ending other programs that my guess is most people would support.
Right. You were listing some. I have a whole list here because
you know better than me then.
Cancer of all kinds, heart disease, Ozempic, which millions and millions of people are taking right now, was discovered at Harvard. Gene editing was discovered at Harvard, which is now curing several diseases like sickle cell anemia, hemophilia, muscular dystrophy. That was also discovered at Harvard. This would impact a lot of people who might not like Harvard, don't support Harvard and what it stands for, but are benefiting from the research that is happening at Harvard.
And that's exactly the point. My view, Elizabeth, I think we agree on this, so I don't want to speak for you. My view is politics now reduces everything to black and white, good guys and bad guys, evil and good. And the truth of the matter is, most of this stuff, there is some gray area. I am not saying, yes, we should just get unlimited, write a blank check from the federal government to Harvard. Could they cover some of this stuff with the $53 billion endowment? They could. Not every dollar of that $53 billion is sort of earmarked and allocated. At the same time, if they don't think that keeping this money from them will somehow change their quote unquote woke admission policies. What it's much more likely to do is impact research particularly on the medical and technological side, that probably benefits society as a whole. It's just we lowest common denominator a lot of stuff in politics, and a lot of nuance winds up getting lost.
Yeah, it sure does. Okay, Chris Cillizza, thank you for wading into the shades of gray on this issue, much as we might want to reduce it to black and white. Great to have you on, my friend. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
I want to bring in Jason Altmaier now. He's the president and CEO of Career Education Colleges and University. It represents trade schools around the country. He's also a former Democratic congressman from Pennsylvania who served 3 terms from 2007 to 2013. Jason, great to have you with us. So what could that $3 billion do for trade schools around the nation?
We're not saying that the money has to come from Harvard, but we do think that an investment in career education is good for the country. We hear from employers all across America that there is a shortage of skilled workers. There's certainly a shortage of opportunity for a lot of students in the country that maybe have tried other things and it hasn't worked out. That's what our schools do. They match students looking for opportunity with employers who are looking for skilled workers. And we all benefit when that happens. There's a lot of ways in career education that federal funding could assist students in accessing high quality schools that can get them on the path to success.
Yeah, these are jobs that AI, for example, will never replace. The kinds of jobs we all rely on at some point in our lives. Plumbers, elevator repairmen, electricians, mechanics.
When you think about auto mechanics, for example, I think some people have an outdated view of the person underneath the car with the wrench and the screwdriver and the grease dripping on top of them. That's not what these jobs are now.
Nope.
These are high-tech technicians that are working with computers and information technology, aviation technicians. We need welders, we need nurses, truck drivers, cosmetology, culinary, all the rest. And, there's commercial drone applications that you learn in career schools, underwater construction. It's limitless. And we're trying to bring manufacturing back to America. Those are our workers from our schools. And any investment in career education is going to benefit everyone in America.
Trade schools are usually 2 years long, and depending on the specialty, it could be as little as a few months. Are students at trade schools having a hard time paying tuition? Could this money help them?
That's what we would advocate. That the first question is, should money be directed to trade schools, career education? The answer is resoundingly yes. The second question is, how could it most effectively be utilized? And we do think that a good portion of it should just allow students to choose the school of their choice, to help them fund their education, give them access, and allow them to pick the school that suits their life circumstances.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out, enrollment at trade schools in the last few years has gone up. More and more people are turning to trade schools as the way to establish a career.
We finally have moved away from this national narrative that if you don't choose the 4-year path for college, you've somehow chosen a lesser option or it's less significant. I'm glad that we're not having that discussion anymore. People realize these are valuable careers. You can make a sustaining wage after you graduate. You can move up in the jobs that you've chosen, and it's just a great opportunity. So for students that are looking to pursue the trades, many of them are non-traditional students. They come from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds in many cases, and they could use the help to attend these schools, and that's how some of that money could be used. You
spent a lot of time in Congress as a very bipartisan congressman. You were right down the middle in your voting record. I've got to ask you, you said you're not necessarily saying we want Harvard's research money. We would just like some more money. Thank you so much. What do you make of this political fight right now between President Trump and Harvard University?
Well, I want to be clear. We're not saying we want the money. We're saying the students should get the money, and then they can choose the school of their choice in a career program. With regard to what the president is doing with Harvard, I would just point out that Democratic administrations in the past weaponized the tools of the Department of Education to go after politically schools that they didn't like. And in that case, those were our schools. And now there's a different administration, and you know, the same thing is being applied to other types of schools. But the wheels were set in motion by prior administrations. So I would hope that in the future, when there's a new administration at some point, and you know, people might have a different ideological perspective on higher education, that they have learned that it goes both ways. And we're just better off as a country if we look at higher education as a benefit to all of America than a political tool to be weaponized.
Right. And higher education, including both four-year universities and trade schools, which provide an invaluable service as well. Jason Altmaier, great to have you on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
All right, coming up for us, a NewsNation exclusive, how former President Joe Biden left behind a secret DEI program worth hundreds of millions of dollars, which appears to discriminate against white farmers. The whistleblower sounding the alarm talks to us next. And could we be one step closer to sending human beings to Mars? But for that to happen, SpaceX will have to successfully launch its Starship tonight. The countdown is on, and we're bringing it to you live. President Trump is not quiet about his criticism of the Biden administration. In fact, he's usually quite the opposite. There is arguably, however, nothing quite as harsh as Trump's anger over Biden's DEI policies. Well, in a NewsNation exclusive, senior national correspondent Brian Enton spoke to a manager at the Federal Farm Bureau who was blowing the whistle. He says a Biden-era law appears to be helping all farmers, but in reality is only helping some. And he showed us the documents to prove it.
When former President Joe Biden left Washington, D.C., he was leaving behind a DEI secret involving American farmers and $800 million in taxpayer money. And a United States Department of Agriculture whistleblower is now sounding the alarm.
It was to pay off anyone who wasn't a white male's loan. That was the only qualification for this loan forgiveness.
And what was the reaction?
So it was really silent. They were trying to keep this hushed because of the obvious implications of race-based loan forgiveness.
Race-based loan forgiveness. It's in black and white, buried in the American Rescue Plan Act. The United States Secretary of Agriculture shall provide a payment in an amount up to 120% of the outstanding indebtedness of each socially disadvantaged farmer or rancher. The act explicitly lays out who's considered socially disadvantaged.
So just to be clear, if you were American Indian, Alaskan Native, Asian Black, African American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, Hispanic, or Latino, and you were in that group, you were told you didn't have to pay your bills, essentially?
Yes, that's correct, and that your loan would be forgiven up to 120% of the loan value.
To me, it was combating racism with more racism. I couldn't believe that it was happening in today's age.
James Dunlap owns a small family farm in Baker City, Oregon. He works 2 other jobs to keep his farm afloat, but did not qualify for the loan forgiveness because he's white.
I knew what they were saying was that minority farmers were going to have their loans forgiven for no reason other than they decided to, they being the government. So.
And how much money they had nothing to do with it.
As far as I understand, not at all. It wasn't about hardship. It wasn't about financial situations at all. It was purely what box you checked under that ethnicity line on your application.
If you checked a non-white box, you got the free money, no matter how rich you were. James and other white farmers sued the Biden administration and were successful. The loan forgiveness for any farmer who's not white was stopped. The judge writing in his decision, it was an actual constitutional harm that cannot be undone. And James and other white farmers will suffer the harm of being excluded from eligibility for that debt relief program solely on the basis of his race. That harm he has shown is irreparable. But this is where things get interesting. The Biden administration was not ready to give up. They passed the Inflation Reduction Act to help farmers who couldn't pay their loans. It was supposed to help all farmers, but NewsNation has learned all farmers were not told about it. NewsNation obtaining a copy of this email that was sent out to share information about new payments and/or loan modifications that may assist you. But here's the catch. Our whistleblower says it was only sent to the minority farmers, aka the socially disadvantaged group. And he says USDA workers were even instructed to tell that group to stop paying their loans because they would still be forgiven. The whistleblower says none of the white farmers he works with received the email.
They got nothing. You know, it might not meet the legal definition of fraud, but it isn't right. It was discriminatory, it was unethical, and the people who pushed it are still in charge of the agency.
They're still in charge?
Yes. At our national office, they're still, Trump hasn't got rid of them.
We reached out to the United States Department of Agriculture. They did not respond to our specific questions or our questions about what the whistleblower said, that some of these DEI policies still remain in effect and in some of the documentation. But they did send us this statement, Elizabeth. I want to read to you in part. It says, it is absurd that while the Biden administration was driving up inflation, American taxpayers were forced to fund billions in woke DEI initiatives. No one should be shocked that Biden weaponized bipartisan farm programs to discriminate and provide taxpayer dollars to one group based on race and not on merit. On day one, Secretary Rollins issued a memo to rescind all DEI programs. Instead, USDA is reprioritizing unity, equality, meritocracy, and colorblind policies. And the USDA says they are also reviewing the Inflation Reduction Act funding to ensure that that money is now going out to all farmers equally instead of just one specific group.
All
Elizabeth.
right, Brian Enton, thank you so much. Coming up for us, the last two Starship launches ended with explosions and debris scattered far and wide. So SpaceX needs a win tonight if it hopes it can get that rocket to Mars next year. We'll have the launch live on our show in just a few moments. Watch it with us. All right, you're looking live at Starbase in South Texas, where Starship test flight number 9 is preparing for takeoff in just a matter of minutes. Elon Musk and his SpaceX team are hoping the third time's the charm with this flight. After Starship's previous 2 launches this year both ended in fiery explosions. There is a lot riding on tonight's Flight 9 for SpaceX. It is hoping that the craft will be ready for a mission to Mars next year. For more on all of this as we get ready to count down, let's bring in retired NASA astronaut Clayton "Astro-Clay" Anderson and Charles Camarada, also a former NASA shuttle astronaut. Great to have both of you here. Okay, we are now, I think, we're about 1 minute from takeoff. I'm going to hear in my ear if they've got any delays as we listen for the countdown. No delays, I'm told, and they're going through their final checks. So, guys, Clayton, I'll start with you. An engineering exec at SpaceX admitted it's been a rough start of the year for Starship. There's a lot riding on this launch tonight.
Yeah, space flight is hard. The neat thing that I see with SpaceX is they keep going. They keep pushing the envelope. They keep trying to do it right. So let's hope today is that first success for them.
All right, Starship Flight 9 is expected, I think it's going to last about an hour, they say, and it's going to go along the same path as the doomed Flight 8, using the same booster that launched the doomed Flight 7. SpaceX says both Flight 7 and 8 exploded for very different reasons. What do we know about what those different reasons are, Charles?
I'm not sure if we know all the details. One of them, it seemed to be, I think, Starship 7 was a leak in the propellant system, which caused the explosion.
Okay.
The other one could have been an engine that basically had a dynamic issue, a resonance issue, which caused the structural failure, caused it to come apart. To the best of that we can divine out from what SpaceX is letting us know.
All right, we're going to listen in now as we get to the final countdown. We should be closing in on 10 seconds to liftoff. Let's listen in.
We did have a hold, and looks like the clock jumped back to T-minus 40 seconds.
All right, so we jumped out. I did not see the deflector go off. So hopefully we were right at around that T-minus 10 second mark.
And if we were before that T-minus 10-second mark. We do have the ability to recycle, as we mentioned earlier, back to T-minus 40 seconds.
So it looked like this time it was a ground side issue. We're taking a look at this real quick. So again, we're back at T-minus 40. We're gonna hold for a little bit.
Okay.
We are still
Clayton,
not
what might be
scrubbed
going
for the
on
day.
here?
Well, anytime you're prepping for a launch like this, a lot of people are looking at a lot of data. And if anybody sees some data that's not where it's supposed to be, then they call for a hold and they try to check it out and see if they can figure out what's going wrong and make sure it's corrected before they lift off. So I would guess it's something like that.
They said it was something toward the bottom of the, it sounds like with the booster. Does that make sense to you?
Well, the booster is going to be the most important part of this today, in that it's where the engines live, and they want to make sure all those engines are doing what they're supposed to do. As they prep for the launch, they'll be checking the data for each and every engine and making sure it's within limits. And if anything gets outside of limits, then that causes people to check into it more deeply.
All right, it's worth noting, this is, not only is there a lot riding on today's flight for SpaceX, this is one of the it's the most powerful space rocket ship, I guess, booster and ship, ever built on Earth. And they're hoping that it will be ready to go to Mars next year. And it's an extraordinary feat of engineering that they have managed to accomplish. Charles, talk about the ambitions SpaceX has and why this is so important, especially after Flight 7 and 8 exploding around 10 minutes after taking off, why they're so anxious that Flight 9 goes smoothly.
Well, this is the one that really has to go perfectly. And that's what we're hoping for. I mean, we've had many failures, several failures with this vehicle, and they have some major hurdles to pass. They have some definitely difficult technical problems with the thermal protection systems, the engines, things that they have to get right. And don't forget, this also impacts the Artemis program and the Artemis 3 mission considerably.
All right, I'm being told that there's a ground side issue that they're now going to put the launch off for at least a few minutes while they address it. Clayton, sounds like more than just I'm getting a funny reading here.
Yeah, these systems are very complex. And from the fueling of the rocket to the checking of the engines, everything has to be, as Charlie said, it has to go perfectly. And we don't want to, even with nobody on board, we don't want to do something or launch this vehicle and when we have a concern that there may be a problem. So they err on the side of caution, which is appropriate because these are test missions, and they'll figure it out. They have before, and hopefully this will be the one.
All right, as people may recall, we all watched the flight, Space Flight 8 on this show a few months ago in March. Space Flight 8 ended after it exploded over the Atlantic Ocean. That explosion and the debris falling from the sky could be seen from Florida, the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos. Flight 7 had a whole different issue. It had a propellant leak that then caught fire. Flight 8 suffered a, quote, flash, followed by something they call a, quote, energetic event. Can one of you guys translate what is an energetic event?
Sounds like an explosion.
Yeah, I think it's a fancy way of saying explosion.
Absolutely.
All right, the countdown, I'm being told, is back on, which is good news. That means whatever they found, they have managed to fix. We are now at 25 seconds. Let's listen in as they count down to liftoff.
Rolling. We'll see if we pass around that T-minus 10-second mark. T plus
Booster
40
and ship,
seconds.
avionic
It's
power,
one
telemetry
hell of a
nominal.
sight from here. We see it arcing right over top of us. We see 33 out of 33 Raptor engines lit on Super Heavy as it starts to ascend skyward. Coming up on maximum aerodynamic pressure, then only about a minute and a half until we get into hot staging.
Wow, Dan, that was incredible. We could feel the building shaking here, feel the vehicle's power. Now we're just about a minute away from shutting down those engines on the booster. Again, this booster is flying for its second time today.
All right, so hot staging coming up a little under a minute. We're going to see all but the 3 center engines turn off on the booster. So our version of MECO, most engines cut off. And then just a few seconds later, hoping to see 6 engines ignite on ship to push it away. All right, hot staging, about 30 seconds. And definitely keep an eye on which way the booster flips. First ever directional flip we're going for today should flip straight up. See those engines powering down?
Booster engine cutoff. Ship ignition. Stage separation.
Incredible flip by Super Heavy booster, and you can see those 6 engines, those 3 engines on the ship ignited.
6 healthy Raptors running on ship on its way to space. Peek that engine view. Booster doing the boost back. Chris, how's it looking over there in Hawthorne, man?
It is looking
chamber pressure is nominal.
It is looking absolutely incredible here in Hawthorne. As we said, 6 healthy engines on ship. We've got 13 out of 13 engines on the booster. Now down to those 3, which is what we expect in the final moments of the boost back burn. Now, as a reminder, we are not recovering the Super Heavy booster today. We are instead going to do some...
Boost back, shutdown.
And there we had a good shutdown of the boost back burn. Next up will be the jettison of that hot stage ring.
Ship avionics, power, and telemetry nominal.
Great call out there that everything looking nominal aboard the Super Heavy vehicle, which is returning to Earth, and we're going to be doing some experiments with it, including a higher angle of attack re-entry, as well as some engine tests as it gets closer to the Gulf. We are, again, because of these tests not recovering it, we are sending it to the Gulf on purpose to do those tests. But again, you see the booster on the left-hand side of your screen. You see ship with 6 healthy engines continuing its ascent to its planned suborbital trajectory. Everything going very well so far for Starship's 9th flight. Now 4 minutes, 15 seconds in. Great views from inside of the aft engine area of ship there, looking at those 3 sea level and 3 Raptor engines on the right-hand side of your screen. The booster doing its LOX dump, that liquid oxygen dump. So because we don't need some of that liquid oxygen propellant in its tanks, we vent that propellant out to lessen the booster's mass as it comes in for its landing. Just absolutely gorgeous views watching these 2 vehicles do their respective things in the skies over Texas here today. And Dan, we're approaching the 5-minute mark into the flight. Super Heavy is descending rapidly. What can we expect here in the next few minutes as it does its atmospheric tests?
Yeah, now as we had talked about, Super Heavy might not have a very smooth ride down. We're going to be putting it through this higher angle of attack. So we're kind of pitching it up a tiny bit, increasing drag. We've done this in wind tunnels. We've done this in computer modeling. It shows that sometimes the control isn't great, but only one way to really prove it out, and that's to get real-world data. So here comes Super Heavy. It should be igniting for its landing burn in just about 40 seconds from now.
And we are going to relight 13 engines, then bring that down to 3 engines. As we talked about earlier, we will be intentionally shutting down. We will be shutting down one of those 3 center engines intentionally to push the limits of the Super Heavy booster.
Ship Raptor, chamber pressures nominal.
And continuing to see 6 healthy engines on the ship, 3 sea level and 3 vacuum engines still ignited as the Super Heavy booster is making its way back down to Earth.
We can see those grid fins doing some heavy work.
Booster landing startup.
Ignited for our landing burn. It may have ended with that landing burn. Does look like we lost telemetry from the booster once we started into that landing burn. Did you hear confirmation that the booster did demise? So the booster's flight ending before it was able to get through landing burn, but again, we are not bringing that back. We're expecting it to make a hard splashdown in the Gulf. We were getting live data back the entire time through that high angle of attack flight, so that was something that was really vital for us to get during this reuse. First free flight of booster in the books. All right, ship has about 2 minutes left.
In about 2 minutes, we expect all 6 Raptor engines to shut down. That will be SECO, basically second engine or second stage engine shut off. And these are some incredible views, Dan, from the aft end of the ship, watching as the engines stay ignited with the Earth in the background.
As always, the Starship avionics team, the techs. I think we just heard the booster. But all right, we got about a minute left into this burn. All eyes definitely on ship as we get through the final stages into its ascent. We're expecting it to start to cut those engines off in about 45 seconds.
All right, everything going very smoothly, at least with the top part of this rocket that just took off from Space Center in Texas, from the latest Space Flight 9. The massive booster called Super Heavy apparently had some issues, and to use the parlance of the commentators from SpaceX, happened upon a, quote, demise. We are going to hear, I'm sure, more in a few minutes about what exactly happened to the booster. It was supposed to splash down into the ocean. Apparently, something else happened. It had some issues and a turbulent re-entry in Earth's atmosphere. That they expected at SpaceX, but obviously they lost control of it at some point. However, the top part of the rocket, which is the Space Flight 9, is going very, very smoothly, as we are seeing right now on the screen. They are shutting down some of the engines at this point. So far, everything's good. We'll keep an eye on this and come right back on the other side of this commercial break with our astronauts who can give us their assessment of what we've just seen. We'll be right back. All right, we're continuing to monitor that Starship launch. SpaceX says the rocket is now orbiting Earth. Its ascent is complete. It's now coasting through space. It is about an hour that it'll do this. Around 45 minutes in, it will begin to re-enter Earth's atmosphere before it will then land. Let's bring in retired astronaut Clayton Clay Anderson and Charles Camerata, also a former NASA shuttle astronaut. So, Clayton, so far, everything with the top of the rocket appears is going perfectly at this point. There were some issues with the booster, which is called Super Heavy, as it was re-entering Earth. They said it experienced a, quote, demise. I'm going to ask you once again to translate. What does that nice speak for?
Well, I think it's nice speak for it broke apart. They were going to change the angle of attack so that they could do some data gathering as it came back down into the atmosphere. And so I'm going to guess that maybe was more than they expected. You know, they said they tested it in the wind tunnel and they tested it with computer models, but you really don't know how it's going to behave until you do it in the real world. And apparently in the real world, it didn't quite match what they had tested before. So that demise means it doesn't exist anymore, or at least it exists in pieces, I'm guessing.
Right. Well, it's worth noting this is the second time that this super heavy booster has been used, and it did perform perfectly, at least in getting the top part of the spaceship up and launched. So, Charles, we're now going to see some experiments that the spaceship will conduct before it lands in about a little less than an hour at this point. Does this set the stage, do you think, enough that we think that a mission to Mars might still be possible next year?
It's still a tough call. You know, they might have had some controllability issues with the booster. They really want to get that right. They were looking at some engine out conditions because they want to be able to catch that booster and make it fully reusable. Now, the true test is going to be when they fly Starship through the atmosphere, enter the Earth's atmosphere, and seeing how the TPS holds up.
What will you be looking for, Charles, to ensure that that's a safe reentry and a successful one?
Well, hopefully we won't see pieces of thermal protection system coming off as we have been seeing. And so that will lead us to believe that it won't burn up. It will get past the high heat and then basically have it flip around and come back and do a soft landing in the Indian Ocean.
Yeah, this is all so tough. It is incredibly hot as these craft reemerge and go through Earth's atmosphere. Let's hope it doesn't experience neither an energetic event or a demise, to use NASA or SpaceX speak. Clayton Anderson, Charles Carmada, thanks so much for being with us as we watch this extraordinary launch today. Really appreciate it. All right, coming up for us, Chris Cuomo joins me live. Chris Cuomo is going to join me now. Chris has Mike Rowe of Dirty Jobs fame. Chris, you're going to be interviewing Mike on your show. I really am anxious to hear his take on this battle between President Trump and Harvard and the threat to take all that money from Harvard and give it to all the trade and vocational schools across the country.
Yeah, I love it. I don't think it's going to happen, but I do think that the discussion is something that Mike and I want to take advantage of. He's been working on this for a long time. I've become a partner of his. You know, for every 5 artisans that retire, we're replacing them with 2.
Oh.
And I know, you know, my daughter just graduated from Cornell. We're so proud. Ivy League education. That's great. Thank you. And you know what it's like to have kids in college, and that's kind of the goal for us as parents. But are we really setting them up for success? Not everybody's ready for college. Not everybody benefits from it. A lot of the degrees don't get you a job. But small business is where it's at in America, and the entrepreneurial base of artisanship is being ignored.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing opportunity. So I like that aspect of the Harvard drama, and Mike and I will pick up that conversation and talk about the vulnerabilities in our society.
It's worth noting that AI will never replace those jobs. You know, AI can't
AI is not fixing your toilet.
Yeah, precisely.
Okay?
All right, Chris, take it away. It's all yours. Have a good show.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.